Hi, everyone, listening back to one of our episodes, Let's Talk Happily Ever After. Today, we've got a lot of guests coming on our show. We're very excited to also talk about How to Be Single, which is the movie that we're going to talk about today. But we wanted to have another voice of opinion on the show. And so, Missy's friend Dan has agreed to come on, and we're very excited to get into it. Can be a controversial movie. It's more modern too, and it can be relatable to a lot of people who might consider themselves single. So, Missy, I'll let you introduce Dan, but we're happy to have you.
Hey, good to be on.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have Dan on. Dan is my go-to man friend for when I feel weird saying man friend, but guy friend when I need dating advice from a guy's perspective. And like Dan has listened to countless voice notes of mine, responded to various texts, and Dan is newly in a relationship, so he knows how to know what being single is like. And so I think he can give us a really good perspective for this podcast episode. Welcome to the podcast, Dan.
What questions you guys got for me? Let's take it away.
So, the movie How to Be Single, it's about a young girl, Alice, and she's played by Dakota Johnson. After 4 years of college, she decides that she needs a break from her long-term boyfriend named Josh. And excited and ready for new challenges, the eager grad moves to New York to take a job as a paralegal, where she meets the character who's played by Rebel Wilson. And helping her navigate her way through that unfamiliar city is Robin, who is Rebel Wilson. She's a fun-loving, wild coworker who enjoys partying and one-night stands. And so, with Robin as her freewheeling guide, Alice can now learn how to get free drinks, meet men, and enjoy the single lifestyle. So that's kind of what How to Be Single, the movie, is in a nutshell. But I think that they actually have a lot of guy characters that come in. They have about three guy characters who
Yeah.
are sort of the main guy characters. And so each of them also have really, I want to say, prominent roles in the film. But I was just curious, Dan, one of my questions for you was if a girl, let's say you dated for a really long time in college, suddenly asked to take a break or even break up to find herself and to understand who she is as a single person, what would your first reaction be, especially if you thought that you guys were in a really good, strong relationship?
Yeah, so I guess I'd have two things. Like number one, I've always been big on I'm never gonna force someone to do anything that they're not comfortable with. If you feel like you need a break or if you feel like this is not what you want anymore, like I'm not gonna hold you hostage. I want you to want to be here with me. And as much as it would hurt, I would rather, somebody be with me of their own free will than feel like they're being like held at gunpoint and forced to stay. Second thing I would do is I know this is a big thing with guys. Like Missy always tells me all the time that men don't communicate as much as they should. And I definitely see it. I mean, so the second thing I would say is what does this time away mean? How long would it be? For what reasons? What is the timeline moving forward? Because a lot of times when people bring something like this, it leads to both parties drifting farther and farther apart until eventually they just split, which especially if I was attached to someone, I wouldn't want to have happen. So I would just say just clarity and communication moving forward. But also, like, if you need space, then take the space, right? We all got free will.
No, it's great. I know Paul and I, are maybe more me than Paul, I guess, talk a lot about like being single and dating right now and like how, there's this app culture. Can you tell us a little bit from like a guy's perspective? How do you feel about like dating apps and, being single and you're like, at this age right now? Do you think we have it better or worse than maybe older generations? How is this going to affect future generations? I know I gave you a lot to think about there.
Yeah. I mean, I think a common response, and perhaps it's a little bit of a I don't want it to feel like a cop out or a lazy response, but and I know a lot of people share this opinion. I generally dislike the app culture because I value like one-on-one connection. And when you're constantly scrolling like you're in a vending machine, it just kind of takes the soul out of it. I feel like, especially like myself, like, and that's a problem I have is when I really like someone, I get attached very quickly. And when a girl or a guy has a lot of options, chances are if they have like 50 people they're talking to, the odds they're going to pick you are kind of slim. Back when our parents were kids, you would go on dates, you would kind of put a little more effort and emphasis into it. And I feel like when you're constantly scrolling, people tend to see someone as just a face on a screen rather than a human being, which is why you have all these problems like people don't communicate, people ghost, people don't take the initiative, right? And a lot of that is because of apps, because of convenience, because you're always if you think you can find better, you're always like a hamster in a wheel. You're always going to be chasing the next best thing, but rarely actually finding it. But I will say, as far as like apps, they're not all bad. Like, say you're a really shy, introverted person that gives you a chance to meet people you wouldn't otherwise meet. It gives you a chance to connect with people that you wouldn't otherwise be with. Like my ex girlfriend I met on Tinder. And I mean, I'm a very simple person. Like, I go to the coffee shop, I go to the gym, I go to work, and I don't do nothing else. So if it wasn't for an app, I wouldn't have met her. But at the same time, like, those are the pros and cons, I'd say.
Dan mentioned that he gets attached too quickly. I immediately thought of Leslie Mann's character, Alice, and that storyline, because in that storyline, the roles are reversed where the younger guy that she's seeing, he gets overly attached first, where she's just like, no, we're just hooking up, like it's fine. And
Yeah, and on top of that, though, she's looking for the right donor for a baby that she wants to have and raise by herself. So it was kind of the both of those elements of, well, actually, so there's this guy who really wants this girl who's kind of looking for the right donor without even knowing that this woman's trying to get pregnant. And so it's almost kind of when that digital element is associated into real life, things can get a lot more hairy, I want to say, and things can get a lot more tricky. And so I think that it's just all very cognizant of the time that we live in right now. But I was curious, kind of going off of what Missy had asked in terms of if you weren't on the dating apps, have you ever approached a girl? What was your meet cute moment like without any apps involved?
I think a couple times in college, and this was always this is another thing. I feel like when you're always on the apps because it's more convenient to hide behind a screen and not like approaching someone, whether you're approaching a guy or girl or whatever you're into. I mean, it's scary, right? Like it's nerve-wracking. You go into it and people always say, oh, the worst you could say is no. Yeah, but you run the risk of public embarrassment, right? Maybe she's with her friends or he's with his friends, and then you have to kind of walk back with your tail between your legs. Like, you don't know if this person's in a relationship, you don't know if they're not ready, you don't look if they're just not in the mood to be bothered. So it's nerve-wracking. But I would say that when I did approach people, at first I didn't really know how to go about it because there's not really a school for this stuff. But I would say I was lucky enough that it was fairly normal. Like, I just kind of walked up. I was like, hey, I think you're really pretty. I'd love to take you out sometime if you'd like, like maybe a girl from class or something like that. I really haven't done that in a few years, actually, because, both of my last relationships I met online. But I do think if I had a choice, I'm old school. I would rather do it face to face in person. Just the human element of it would be preferable.
And I think COVID also hurt us in that regard, where I think COVID changed so much of that dating aspect. So I wonder if that could have also impacted how we are so reliant on these apps now. Because I think a lot of my friends, the majority, have met their significant others on these apps. And they're also all of recent graduates who were impacted by COVID. So I think that there's this element of now we just associate apps as the place to go because there isn't any other way.
yeah, my last question is in this movie, and I feel like just in general, girls or women are constantly, oh, be single, find yourself, womanhood, take back yourself and your time. What is the mindset of like a guy when they're single? Or is it just straight up, let's hook up, let's hook up? Like, are guys trying to find themselves too? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's kind of like two schools of thought with men, at least, and this is just my opinion. Some guys never really grow out of it, but you will get those guys that are just looking to brag and boast about like how many people they hook up with. And I've always been very averse to that. I don't like when, people talk about that no matter what gender you are. I think it's like, I think it's kind of hollow. I think it's even like degenerate to an extent, right? Like, I mean, I don't look at people like they're expendable. I don't think anybody should look at people like that. I mean, it's one thing if, you're just finding yourself or something, but I feel like sometimes, especially guys, take that too far. And I'm like, that's a person, right? Like but, and I also think that guys, especially, at least, and I try to stay out of Instagram comment sections. They're terrible. I really do. But I feel like, and I could be very wrong, that if you're a woman and you're single, it's like, oh, girl power, you're independent, you don't need no man. But if a guy is single, he's almost like looked as a failure, right? Like, oh, nobody wants to be with you, nobody wants to look at you. And I mean, both are different, but I would say the last thing I would have to say really is that I generally don't like when people look at you as the sum of your relationship status, your financial status, your friendship status. If there's anything I can say to anybody is that you know you're not going to be a good person just because you're in a relationship, and you're not going to be a bad person just because you're single. You're more than that, right? You have value, internally, with or without that. And like I always say to you, Missy, like better to be single and be happy than to, be with someone or try and force yourself to be something you're not, right? And I think that goes without saying.
I think Dan summed up the movie, to be quite honest. I don't think anyone needs to watch How to Be Single at this point because I think at the end, spoiler, Dakota Johnson kind of figures out, I'm comfortable being by myself. I'm comfortable and empowered by everything I can do. And she figures life out on her own and learns to love her friends too. And yeah, I think that was a really great way to kind of frame everything together.
Now, no, Dan, I think everyone who listens will also agree that you really summed it up perfectly.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on. I know it was a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but we really appreciate your perspective. And hopefully we can have you come on again.
Yeah, for sure. My pleasure.
We're super excited. This week's episode, we have not one but two guests, and you already heard from Dan. And now we have my very, very good friend, Donna. Donna and I were former coworkers and became best friends. Donna is recently out of a relationship and on the prowl looking. And she is just so inspiring. She has two kids, she's a mom, and we really wanted to get her perspective for this movie because I feel like How to Be Single really focuses on just the younger generation of 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds, like that out of college generation. And so we wanted Donna to come on because she's also just she's not a fun mom, she's a cool mom. And so I get her perspective. So Donna, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you both for having me. I'm super excited.
I want to quickly say, just because I know Donna, I feel like our if we were to pick which character we both identified with in this movie, I would almost say we are reverse. I feel like I identify more as Leslie Mann's character, the older sister, whereas you're more of like the young, let's go out, have fun, like free-spirited Dakota Johnson character. Would you agree with that?
I actually would have said that, yes, I'm Dakota and you're Rebel. You're Robin. Because let's be honest, Missy.
I don't
We
have a
have
filter.
gone out before, and not that you're a big partier because you don't like to drink, but I feel like throughout when I was going through my divorce, you were so supportive and you're like, go out, you've got this, you've got this. So you are the cheerleader.
Aw, thank you.
Wait, that's so great that you both are already kind of thinking about which characters you would be because I know Missy usually come prepared with spill the popcorn tidbits. But so How to Be Single was actually the writer was also part of the Sex and City writing. And so a lot of people think that the four girl main characters were based off of kind of four of the main characters in Six and the City. So I was just curious, and you already answered it in terms of who you thought you were and who you thought each of those characters were based off of. But I think that's so fun.
That's such a good
I,
popcorn fact. Sorry, Donna, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, go ahead.
Because I really loved the scene when they're in the park and she just got dumped by Josh and Leslie Mann's character, I forget what her name is in the movie. Meg, sorry, her name is Meg. She's like, you don't need to be in your single girl era and watch Bridget Jones' Diary and Sex and the City because at the end of the day, all those girls do is just want boyfriends anyway. And so when you just said that it was the same kind of writer, I love that.
And I didn't realize, Paula, until you just said that, I can see the correlation with the four main women.
It's one of those things where when you know the little tidbit, it makes so much more sense. Because I also, when I watched the movie for the first time, did not know. But I think that now, like you said, it makes a lot of sense. But Donna, I was just curious in terms of the characters and kind of going back to your life, were there ever moments where you were in a relationship, maybe in college, and then you wanted to find out what singlehood meant for you and kind of wanted to know who you were outside of a relationship?
So, full disclosure, Paula, I married my high school sweetheart. So, I never had the single life, in my opinion. And when I was going through my divorce, I thought, okay, as soon as this is over, this is my time. Like, this is going to be a single life for me. And pretty much the movie, I watched it while I was going through my divorce and thinking, oh, wow. So I really did think it was going to be somewhat like the movie, even though it's not 100% realistic in certain ways or aspects.
I love that you said that. That's what we talk about all the time. How realistic are the rom-coms? Or I guess me, that's what I go from.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I think some of it was realistic, but go back to your question, Paula. I don't think I answered it. What was
So you were a high school sweetheart, but then what was it like for you, especially watching the movie as you're going through the divorce? Were you kind of excited to kind of know who you were as a single person?
Yes, and I'm still figuring it out because I feel like I really still haven't been single for that long. Full disclosure again, I'm going to be 50 this year. It's interesting. It's interesting to go out, and there's so many single women out there. There's so many of my friends who have gone through divorce and are all out there doing the same thing. It's exciting. It's scary. I never went on any of the apps. I thought it was funny, the one character who like had the spreadsheet and was, she started in the movie with the peanuts and was like, okay, there's only this tiny little percentage of men there. I thought, oh my God, do people really do that?
That
And
was
then
one of my favorite scenes when she did
Wait, me
that.
too.
you guys have that in common. That's adorable. My favorite scene is when, this is a funny part, when Meg is taking the pregnancy test, and then Rebel Wilson comes in. She's like, "Oh, what are we taking a test for?" And the sisters are so excited because they're like, "Yeah, we're positive." She's like, "I'm positive for drugs."
I think Rebel Wilson was the perfect casted woman for the Samantha role. If we're gonna go with Sex in the City, I think she was clearly the Samantha role in this kind of this movie, and I loved her humor. She had so many one-liners that just made me do a spit take if I was actually drinking water.
She was definitely the calm of the movie.
1000%.
I think one of my favorite scenes too was also when Leslie Mann was going through whether or not she wanted a kid, and then she had the baby, and she was talking to the baby about how she didn't want the baby, but she obviously did want the baby, and the baby was just looking at her like, "What is this woman doing?" But I think that was also one of my favorite
That was
scenes.
amazing because I feel like the baby was staring in her eyes, like however they captured that was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I also want to say all the kids, even Phoebe too, all of the kids slash babies in this movie were so cute. And I want to know what they look like now because I'm sure they're beautiful.
Ooh, yeah, I wonder what they look like now.
Oh my gosh, yes. We would love, Donna, to hear your favorite meet cute moment because there are technically three plus couples in the movie. So we can really talk about any one of those meet cute moments. But was there a really favorite couple in the film for you, Donna? And if so, what meet cute moment just kind of stood out to you?
So definitely by far my favorite couple was Meg and I forget what his name was.
Oh, the receptionist. I don't know his,
Yes,
I forget his name.
Ken. His name
Ken.
was Ken.
Ken.
Yes. So when they were at the holiday party and she was eating the cheeseburgers and then he comes over and he was like, "You were looking at me, right?" Or something like that. And then he's like, "Oh no, did I get that all wrong?" And that to me was the cutest thing because he just was saying how he was into girls just like her. Because he goes, "Oh, I was attracted to you or something." And she goes, "Why?"
Yeah, that was
He just
perfect.
looked at her. And throughout their whole relationship in the movie, she always sort of questioned why. And he was just so cute and so authentic. Like he was so honest.
They were the cutest couple. I thought that meet cute moment was the most meet like honest
Yeah.
because I thought it was I made the most sense. And I know Donna, you and I have been at holiday parties together. I feel like that is a very common way to, if you see a coworker or see someone. So that felt very natural to me. As
Yeah.
far as the meet cute moments in the movie. What about you, Paula?
I don't know if a guy ever would come up to me at a holiday party, but I do think that they had the most authentic connection. And Donna, as you mentioned, when Leslie Mann's character was just constantly asking why, but he was just like, don't ask the why because I'm here for you. I thought that was a really good relationship. But I also think that what made more sense to me in thinking back to my college experience was it's also realistic for when Dakota Johnson met her original boyfriend and she's walking to the communal shower. And I don't know if my towel would ever slip. And if I wouldn't rush back into my room, I think she just kind of lingered without her towel for a little too long. But I think that that was also total realistic. And if a guy did that, I don't know if I would find it kind of
Yeah.
like, I don't
Well,
know if I
first
would
of
find
all,
that
do
good.
people even do that? Do they really walk with their towels?
In college, I remember there was a
And there's
co-ed.
floors, like there's
Yeah.
female floor, male floor. So I actually I find that to be a little unrealistic.
Well, so my co-ed floor actually, it was a co-ed floor. And to get to the girl bathroom, I would have to go past guys and their rooms. And, and thinking back now, that's probably not the best way to handle it. There should be more girl floors and then guy floors, but no, there were moments where I would go walk to my shower and guys would be coming back from football practice.
I think at that point I'd let my towel slip.
Oh, Missy.
Depending on
What's
what position
Robin?
he played, let's be real. Are you the quarterback? Oh, whoopsie.
That's the Missy I know and love.
So thank goodness I didn't go to a college where we shared the same floor bathrooms because my number would be a lot higher than than it is.
Also, don't know if it's realistic if a guy would take his towel off to cover her. Like, I like the sentiment of it, but maybe like block her. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
maybe stand in front of her and block her, or I don't know. I don't, although some men aren't that smart, maybe they would take the towel off,
Yeah.
which then would be even cuter.
One thing I really appreciated about the movie too is I felt like I know we keep talking about Meg and Ken's character, but this is, and we could talk about the other couples. I really liked how I felt like Meg's character was the boy in the relationship, whereas Ken was more of the girl, or maybe had more female qualities where he was more invested, more emotionally charged, and was overthinking, over communicative, where she was just like, no, bro, like, we're not getting a Christmas tree, we're, this is the end. Or I don't know, I just, what did you guys think? I felt like it was cool to see the role, I guess, reversal for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think he at one point said it when he said, My dream was always to be a stay-at-home dad."
Yeah.
And that made me kind of appreciate how invested he was in the relationship already. I mean, he literally I just found out that she was pregnant and it's not even his baby. But I don't know, Donna, how about you? Do you think that you would have been, I mean, if a guy suddenly were to be so invested in you today and want to completely come into your life and is so there for you, would you appreciate that?
So I feel like that's a loaded question. Um, I think naturally the majority of women would appreciate that. I think coming out of a very, very long relationship, I was very much like the main character, Dakota, where she just wanted to be independent. And Missy could attest to this. Like, I want to do everything on my own.
Yeah.
I want to pay all my own bills. I want to own all my own stuff. I don't want to rely on anyone. And it's not a dig at men. I don't want to rely on men, family, anything, anyone, excuse me. I want to be able to do a lot on my own. So I could relate with her wanting to be independent. But then again, I do know certain couples that the men in the relationship are very much like him, like Ken, like they're more of the stay-at-home dad kind and more of the emotional one. And I think maybe that's why sometimes those relationships work because they're sort of switching roles.
I guess my question is about kind of the ending of the movie now, Donna. How did you like the ending of the movie? I think the ending is really where Dakota's character says that there are going to be more moments in life where you're occupied by either having to take care of a pet or you're having to take care of a family member. And there are going to be less moments where you're just genuinely able to be by yourself. But how did you kind of think about the ending and would you agree?
What I loved most about the ending was that she actually did what she said she wanted to do in the very beginning. So hiking, I forget where she hiked on New Year's Eve by herself, and she was preparing for it, going to the gym with the backpack on and all that. But what I loved prior to that was when she went back to Robin's when she found Robin at her apartment and was like, I love you. So her relationship with her best friend was so much more important than her romantic relationship and trying to find a man. And that really, for me, was the standout of the whole movie. Like my key takeaway from the movie was is your friendships are more valuable than finding a significant other. And I say this all the time about I have one of my dearest friends. I said, I think she's my soulmate. I wouldn't replace her for the world. And I think oftentimes we live in a society where we think we all need to find a significant other, right? We need to find a man, we need to get married, we need to have kids, and now we need to do all that plus work. No, that's not reality anymore. And nor do I want my daughter to think that's reality. I mean, it was a long movie for a rom-com. I don't know how you guys feel, but I love rom-coms. This was a long rom-com. I feel like they're usually shorter, but I did love the four women in it and learning about each of their relationships. And I loved, I think it was Lucy who ended up with the guy from the bookstore. I feel like that it's a very small piece of the movie, but a very interesting and important piece of the movie because she was the one with the spreadsheets trying to figure out how to find this man. And what happened? Spreadsheets didn't help her. She was reading a book and having a bad day. And it was organic. It was like the invisible string theory. Like she was meant to be reading that book at that bookstore, and he met her there.
I am so happy you brought that up. As you could see, I could not contain myself when you said that because first of all, I love the way that they met and I love that it was for her and that was great. However, I really wish she ended up with the bartender.
With Tom? So how
Mhm.
funny was it that at the birthday party, Tom, see, now this is where I feel that the comedy part comes out a lot. That, and I love how she sort of gave it back to Tom. He really thought he was in love with her. And
Yep.
before the end of the movie, I thought, oh my God, maybe they would end up together. And
Mhm.
when he was saying at the birthday party how he thinks she should be with him and not George or something, I don't remember. And then she gave it to him. She was like, oh, yeah, you're right. And she was like putting her hand on him, like, I should be with you. And he was lighting up. And then she goes, oh, but we should get married real soon and have kids. And then all of a sudden you can see his body language. And he was like, yeah, but maybe we should pump the brakes a little. And she's like, I'm fucking with you. No. And then I love when the boyfriend, the fiance came over and was like, dude, stay the F away from my girlfriend and da 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 da. And then he's like, I'm fucking with you too. And then he goes, oh no, no, really. Like, will you be my best man? And then he kept going back and forth. But I like that she ended up with him versus Tom. Tom, I hate to say this, Tom is your stereotypical what women think of men that don't want to be with a woman.
Class A definition of a fuckboy, which is
Yeah.
probably why I wanted her to end up with him. But I did not realize the whole movie, I thought that they were going to end up together. I did not realize that there was going to be a plot twist at the end with this George character. Even when she met George at the bookstore, oh, she's just going to date him for a while. And then there's going to be that, third act scene where like Tom comes in and is like, no, you deserve to be with me, kind of like at the birthday party. So yes, I'm happy she got that fairy tale, not in the way that she was so calculated with trying to get that fairy tale at the ending, but at the same time, Tom,
Yeah, I don't really feel bad for Tom. Tom,
I feel like Paula agrees with you.
I think it goes back to how intentional the writers were about putting a lot of stories in the movie that could really hone in on the how to be single point. So I think for Tom's character, it was the fact that he needed this realization that maybe he was ready for something to get him out of the, well, I'm just going to sleep with all these women stage. So maybe now he'll be a little bit more careful, hopefully. And then I think also for the other character who we didn't talk a lot about, David character, the guy with the daughter,
yep.
and how he was also meant to be single for a little bit because I think the whole movie, what it did, and I think was realistic, was how maybe everybody just needs a little bit of time to kind of assess for themselves where they might be, where they might want to go. And I find that really relatable because I've been single for I don't even want like a decade now. I've literally been single for so long where I have realized that even after all this time, if you can just kind of know what you want in a relationship, you're gonna go into it a lot more in a healthier way than if you don't really know what you want. Because then you're going to hurt so many people, including yourself, I think.
True. And then to just to add to that is that's why you need to be single, right? Because you don't really know, especially someone like me who and I don't regret getting married and as long as I was married, it was great. It gave me my two beautiful children, but I didn't know anything else. I think she said in the movie, so somebody said in the movie, I think it was Dakota Johnson in the movie, like she went from, moving out to being with her boyfriend Josh, and I literally went from sharing a room with my twin sister to sharing a room with my husband. Like I never even had my own bedroom till now.
Yeah.
Like it's just mind blowing. So I think you raised a really good point. Each character really was going through their own way of being single
Yeah.
or how to be single.
I feel like each character needed to come to terms and accept their realities or their situations, and kind of whether it was Dakota Johnson learning to find herself and love herself authentically, or David's character learning to be a single dad and accept that his wife has died and he needs to now, in order to move forward, he needs to understand that she's still part of it. So I think each person did their own kind of soul searching and grieving and came out stronger in the end, almost like, yeah, proud to be single and proud to be themselves, even more so than before.
Yeah, I think the only person who probably didn't do that, and maybe it's because she was more experienced in being single, was Robin, was Rebel Wilson. She was never looking for anything. She was just, I mean, maybe it was just because she was the supporting actress. I feel the rest of the main characters were all figuring out how to be single.
Yeah, I think there was even that confrontation scene where she said to Dakota Johnson's character, I'd rather be
Birthday
kind of,
party.
I forget exactly what she said, but she, I think also had a moment where she could put herself out there in terms of she knew who she was and she wasn't apologetic for it.
I agree 1,000%.
Which is great and empowering for other women.
Paula, question for you and for you, Donna, actually. Because Paula, you were just talking about how you've been single and how you're super strong. This movie made it seem like being single, you don't know how to zip your own dress or you can't find your own router. So, question for you ladies, do you know where your routers are and what they're used for?
Oh my gosh, Missy, can you zip up your dress? Yes, like you'll find me dancing in awkward positions to do it, but at the end of the day, I will zip my own dress. I will find my own way. And I think this is the whole reason why we have this podcast too, though, is because there is this element as human beings that we want to find someone or something to be with. That's kind of the qualm that I had about the entire ending, where she almost it almost sounded as if, maybe adopt a puppy and then value that time. But I think that even if you adopt a dog and you have a family member that you take care of and you are single, you can still kind of realize and value that time without having to be completely by yourself. But I don't know. That's just kind of maybe how independent I've become is I'm so comfortable being even when I'm with a dog or even when I'm with a family member caretaking after them, like I still feel confident, but I don't know. That
I
was
agree with you 100%, Paula, because I am on my own. My daughter's away at college. My son shares his time. So there are plenty of days of the week and weekends that I'm on my own. I do have my daughter's cat that I'm watching while she's abroad, but I still feel alone. And I do still like check in with family members, but I still consider myself, single and on my own. So I agree with you 100%. I will say, funny story about the whole zippering up the dress part. And mind you, this is while I was married. I was leaving for work and I couldn't zip my dress. And nobody was home. Kids were off to school, husband was off to work. And I walked out to my car, and my neighbors, two of them were walking their dog. And I'm like, sorry, excuse me for just a minute. I'm like, can you zip the back of my dress?
no, but I count that, Donna, as you zipping up your own dress. Like somehow, like you don't need a man to do that, Like you
Right.
will find a friend who can do that. And I think I would consider that you finding how to zip that dress without needing the man.
Right.
Of
Yeah,
course.
because I
I
just
agree.
asked them. I was able to ask them. And to answer your question, Missy, I'm staring at my router. I know where it is and I know what it does. Now,
I do
my
not know what
drawer
my
is broke and I can't fix it. I'm gonna have to ask someone to fix that, but I'm okay with that. I will figure it out who I'm gonna get to fix it.
That's what I love that you just said. You're gonna figure out. And I think that's what I think instinctually this movie was really talking about in the way of, a router, a dress, or changing the channel on, changing the language on your TV. It's not that you can't do those things. It's you can do those things, but it's nice to have someone who can help you. But can you do it yourself? And if you're in that moment, like with you with your just your dress story, you were by yourself. You used your own resources and your neighbor happened to be outside. You know what I mean? So I think it's just really embracing your own inner superpowers and who you are. And so yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think everyone, like if I had to give advice to my younger self or to single women out there, I would say definitely explore being on your own and being independent because, again, it's a nice want, but you don't want to have to need it.
Yeah. That's, I
I
think, the best ending there. Like
Yeah.
no, no more needed. No more comments needed.
I just want to give a huge shout out to the soundtrack because I thought the soundtrack of this movie was bangers after bangers. And it was funny because I watched this at night, like I was kind of like winding down, ready to go to bed. However, this movie, every single song made me want to just like get up and dance and get my heels on. I don't know about you guys.
I don't remember, like nothing stood out for me for the soundtrack, but I will say I love some of the relatable things in the movie. So they made a comment about Ross from Friends. So for me, like my generation, that was awesome. They did like the pounds, which again is more like my generation. They talked about, uh, I think it was Kevin. He said to Meg at one point, like, "Oh, that was on my vision board." So
I
I
love
remember.
that line.
So I loved all those things. Those little things stood out to me.
Yeah. Mystic, I
No,
think the only song that I can remember is the Welcome to New York scene with Taylor Swift.
which
And
I'm glad
when,
you brought that up.
yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, 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 go for it.
I was gonna say have a spill the popcorn for that one.
Okay.
I thought that that was a perfect song for her going to the city because obviously, yes, she's moving to New York. But on Taylor's YouTube channel, when asked about what she wrote that song for and what the meaning behind it is, I quote, she wrote, I approached moving there with such wide eyed optimism and sort of saw it as a place of endless potential and possibilities. And you can kind of hear that reflected in the music and in that first song, which is Welcome to New York on her album. And so, whoever the music person was for this movie did such a great job, I think, really tying that song to that moment because that's really what it was about for Dakota Johnson's character as well.
Yeah. I see we have a little timer left. So to end, Missy, do you have any last minute questions or any last minute comments to tie it all up?
Donna, if you could change anything about the movie, what would you change? Like, would you bring in a different character? Would you have a different ending for someone? Like how I wanted Lucy and Tom to be together, RIP, but I'll get over
Well,
it.
at the end of the day, I am more of a romantic person than comedic person. So I would have loved to have seen Dakota Johnson find someone, like find love, maybe shorten the movie a little bit, explore being on your own, and then naturally find someone, whether it was going back with Josh or, hiking on the mountain and then it ending that she meets some guy on the top of the mountain. Like that's just who I am. Like I always like to see a romantic comedy end with a couple. And
Yeah.
she was on her own at the end.
That would have been so interesting, Don, if a guy was at the top of the mountain after she had that time to kind of be alone. Because, yeah, the movie kind of leaves you, not a pun intended, but kind of at a cliffhanger because it's about how to be single. But I think as humans, we're always saying how we as humans always need somebody else. And so even if that's a person or if just your dog. And so that would have been nice to kind of see that holistic togetherness.
How about you, Paula?
Awesome.
Any last questions, thoughts?
If I could change one thing about the film, I think it would have just been a little bit more diversity. I think that this film could have included more diversity. And I think I say this in a lot of the episodes, Donna, where sometimes I don't want a movie just to have diversity for diversity's sake. But I think that this one could have afforded a little bit more diversity because, especially because it's filmed in New York.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
too, because this is the 10th year, so it's been 10 years since this movie came out, a lot has changed. I think it would have been awesome to see a same-sex couple in there, or even like you mentioned in the beginning, Paul, as someone who's asexual, or maybe figuring out that they're asexual and how they can embrace that and being single. So I think it was great for a more modern rom-com, but to even take it to that next level, would have liked to seen those things as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then, well, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But thank you so, so much, Donna, for coming on the show. You literally were you made everything so relatable. And I think a lot of our listeners will really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank
I
you.
just want to
Thank
really quickly,
you.
because we asked Dan before he left, I want to ask Donna, what is your favorite rom-com?
Hands down, 51st Dates.
Ooh, we're gonna
I'm a
have to
huge,
welcome you back.
okay, I'm a huge Drew Barrymore fan. My son's name is Drew. My daughter almost was Drew. I love her. I love that. I love everything about that movie. I could watch it over and over again.
Did you ever watch Fever Pitch, Donna?
Yes.
All right, so we'll have to have Donna come back for a Drew themed episode
Yes.
if
Yeah.
she
I
if you
mean,
want to.
rom-coms are great. My favorite movie of all time, Under the Tuscan Sun. And I wouldn't consider that a rom-com, would you guys?
Is it under our more rom than com?
Yes.
Yeah,
Full disclosure, I've
that's
never seen it.
I think
Which
I started to see it, but what's her name? Is it her name?
Diane Lane.
Yes, yes. I think I that was on my list for a long time.
Wait, you
I need to
haven't
watch
seen it
that.
yet?
No.
Oh, need to see
Oh
it.
my God,
I
we could
think you'd
have a
actually really
reverse
like it.
podcast episode where Donna interviews us and asks us our questions.
Wait, you haven't seen it either, Missy?
Well, I just said full disclosure, I've never seen it.
Oh, I didn't hear you. That was my go-to when I would have like nights in alone, my twin sister and I, or even me by myself, that was always my go-to. Wine, cheese, and Under the Tuscan Sun.
Okay,
Mine's
well,
been
I
cherries and
needed
not
a
only
movie.
days.
You're both watching it.
Okay,
Oh,
I needed a
totally.
movie, so
There you
I
go.
love
thank you,
it.
Donna.
Well,
You're
thank you so
welcome.
much, Donna. We will definitely welcome you back if you would love to come back.